In our ever-growing series of fearless interrogations, we now encounter the softly spoken member of one of the biggest bands in the world. For some reason best known to himself, Philip Selway of Radiohead allowed himself to be put under the Marc Riley microscope, with devastating results. Not really. It's good though. Manic Q&A. What is your name and what musical outfit are you a member of?
Hi, my name's Philip Selway and I play drums in a band from Oxford called Radiohead.
What is your first musical memory?
My first musical memory is from Christmas Day 1969. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and saw that Santa had already been and had also left a present from my godmother next to his big pile. So that was the first present I went to. I unwrapped it and it was a toy drum. And, well, you can guess the rest after that. I don't think my family thought it was a particularly musical experience and banned me from drums for well over a decade after that.
What was the first record you bought?
I bought my first record at Woolworths in Newport when I was about 8 or 9. I'd gone into the shop hoping to buy an Elvis Presley record, but couldn't afford that. And then I saw another record. It was called The Early Years of the Beatles with Tony Sheridan, featuring recordings from when they were doing their residency in the Star Club in Hamburg.
Have you still got it? And do you still like it?
I do still have the record, although I must admit I haven't listened to it for quite some time. But last time I did listen, I thought the band showed some promise, really. So whatever happened to them, I hope it all turned out well.
What was the first gig you attended as a member of the audience?
Back in 1982, I remember going to swoon over Clare Grogan when Altered Images played at Oxford Polytechnic. And opening for them that night was a band called the Bluebells. So I guess, technically speaking, they're the first band I ever saw.
What was the first gig you played?
My first gig was back in 1983. It was in a small village hall in a place just outside Oxford called Farmore. I was in a band with friends from school and we were doing covers of songs by bands like Stiff Little Fingers, UK Subs, Crongen, stuff like that. The name of the band was Phil the Pill and the 10 Foots, so less said about that the better really. And it was actually the first time I'd ever played on a full drum kit, so I can only say that my preparation for shows these days is markedly better.
Have you ever screamed or cried at a gig?
I think I've probably screamed inwardly at a number of gigs I've performed in, and one show in particular I remember where I cried as well, actually, and it was in 1997 and it was Portishead at the Brixton Academy. It was right in the middle of everything that was happening around OK Computer for us, and I think I'd probably been sat on a lot of varying emotions, and there's something about the show which unlocked it all. So I was rather embarrassingly there, blubbing in the middle of your auditorium. Fortunately it was dark, and I'm not sure anybody noticed.
Who was the first person you kissed?
Shame on you, Marc Riley. You know a gentleman doesn't kiss and tell.
And are you still talking to him, her, or it?
I'm not sure if we'll still be talking, Mark, if you pursue this line of questioning.
If you could go back in time and prevent one band in particular from forming, who would it be and why? And don't give me any of that, oh, I wouldn't like to say which band should never have existed nonsense. Just give me a bloody name.
Well, that's easy. Back in the early noughties, there was a band formed around a duo from the northwest who did parodies of Britpop and indie anthems, for want of a better word. They had the gall to do an album which they called R-Kid A, with A spelt E-H. Their name was The Shire Horses, and on that album they had tracks, well, classic tracks such as, let's have a look, A Roll With It by Postfaces, If You Tolerate This Piss by Manic Street Sweepers, and No Big Sizes by Radiohead. So, I don't know what happened to this band, but I'm sure no good ever came of them.
Have you ever had a fight on stage? And if so, with whom and who won?
The thing about drumming is that you're fixed to one point on the stage. So if people stay outside of drumstick's reach of you, they can say and do pretty much what they want and you can't respond. Colin Greenwood is a past master of this one. So the only fights I've had on stage really are with drums themselves. They've won a few battles, but I like to think I'm winning the war.
If you could be a fly on the wall in any band's dressing room, which band would it be and why?
It'll come as no surprise that backstage at Radiohead shows, while it's all cups of tea, dips and quiet contemplation. So if I was going to be the fly on the wall in any band's dressing room, it would have to be one that did it properly, lived it large. So I think that would involve going back to the 70s and witnessing how a band like Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin did it, just to see how the real pros did it.
Have you ever asked anyone for their autograph?
I'm not much of an autograph hunter, but I do have a few. I've got one from Big Ron Atkinson, and I got that at the National Five-a-Side Championships in 1979 at Wembley Arena. And I've also got a baseball hat signed by Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. I won that in a raffle a couple of years ago. And, of course, there's always a space on my wall for a signed photograph from Marc Riley.
If you were expecting either Sean Keaveney or Marc Riley at a dinner party at yours, what treasured possession or valuables would you put under lock and key?
I like to think that my approach to hospitality is one of what's mine is yours, but I must admit this question has made me feel slightly nervous. So if Sean or Marc were to come round to my house for a dinner party, wouldn't necessarily hide anything away, but I would pat down their pockets as they were leaving under the guise of a nice man hug.
And finally, have you got a message, polite or otherwise, you would like to pass on to Marc Riley?
Thanks for having me on the show, and I'd just like to say that of all the DJs I've ever listened to on Six Music, Marc Riley, you are undoubtedly one of them.